How I Ended Up with Millions in Debt. A true-to-life audiobook story. Narrated in first person. A cautionary tale of ambition, blindness, and hard-won wisdom. The night everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had a lunch meeting scheduled that day. A lunch I would never make it to. I was sitting at my desk when my phone lit up with 3 calls in a row. My bank, my business partner, and then a number I didn't recognize, which turned out to be a lawyer. By noon, I knew the number. The full, terrible, impossible number. 4,237,000 pesos. That was what I owed. That was the hole I had dug for myself over the course of 5 years. One bad decision at a time. One borrowed peso at a time. One lie I told myself at a time. I was 41 years old. I had a wife, 2 kids, a house I no longer really owned, and a business that was burning to the ground while I stood outside it, holding the match. This is that story. I'm telling it not because I enjoy revisiting the worst years of my life, but because I know that someone out there is standing where I was standing 5 years before that Tuesday. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're reading this because something already feels wrong. Or maybe you're reading this at the beginning of something that feels exciting, and you just want to make sure you're doing it right. Either way, I hope this saves you. Chapter 1. The Kid Who Wanted Everything. Let me take you back to where it all started. Not the business, not the loans. Let me take you back to a boy who grew up without much. I was the youngest of 4 children in a middle-class family in the province. My father worked in a government office. My mother sold rice cakes on the side to make ends meet. We weren't poor. We ate 3 times a day, and we went to school. But I grew up knowing the exact weight of not enough. I knew what it felt like when the school tuition was late. I knew the sound of my parents arguing about money behind a closed door at night. And I made a decision very early in my life. I would never feel that way. I would be the one who made it, the one who would break the cycle. That decision, that fire, was the best thing about me. It drove me to study harder than anyone I knew. It got me a scholarship. It got me a job in Manila right out of college. It made me ambitious in a way that people around me genuinely admired. But that same fire, that same hunger, it would eventually become the thing that burned me down. Because I didn't just want to be comfortable. I wanted to be wealthy. I wanted it fast. And I was arrogant enough to believe I could make it happen without knowing what I didn't know. Chapter 2. The First Business. I was 26 when I quit my corporate job. Everyone thought I was crazy. I had a good position at a logistics company, stable salary, health benefits, the whole package. My mother cried when I told her. My boss looked at me like I had announced I was joining a cult. But I had a plan. Or what I thought was a plan. My college friend Ricky and I had been talking for 2 years about opening a food business. We had done our research, which mostly consisted of eating at a lot of restaurants and watching YouTube videos about entrepreneurship. We had a concept, a fast, casual Filipino fusion place. Something that would bridge traditional flavors and modern presentation. Instagrammable, trendy, affordable but elevated. We rented a small space in a commercial strip. We hired a contractor to renovate it. We hired a chef. And then we ran out of money before we even opened. The renovation cost twice what we budgeted. The equipment we needed was more expensive than we expected. The permits, took 4 months and cost us an additional amount we had never planned for. So we did what felt logical at the time. We borrowed. Ricky's uncle lent us a significant amount. I took a personal loan from the bank. We told ourselves it was fine. Once the restaurant opened, the revenue would cover everything. We had projections. We had a spreadsheet. We had confidence. We opened in October. By the following April, we closed. The location was wrong. The foot traffic was wrong. The margins were tighter than we understood. And neither Ricky nor I actually knew how to run a restaurant. We knew how to dream about running one. That is not the same thing. I lost everything I had saved. Ricky and I had a falling out over money that took years to repair, and I was left with a personal loan I would be paying off for the next 3 years. But here's the dangerous part of that story. I didn't learn the right lessons. I told myself the restaurant failed because of bad luck, bad timing, bad location. I told myself that the idea was right, the execution was just off. I told myself that next time I would do it better. I didn't ask myself whether I actually knew what I was doing. I didn't ask myself why I thought passion was a substitute for knowledge. I just picked myself up, got a job to pay down the loan, and started planning the next thing. Chapter 3. The Real Estate Dream. At 30, I met a man named Dennis at a networking event. Dennis was the kind of person who filled a room. He was loud, confident, funny, and seemingly very, very rich. He wore a watch I couldn't name, but that looked expensive. He talked about his properties the way other people talk about their children, with obvious love and the assumption that everyone else was equally invested. Dennis had a proposal. He was putting together a group of investors to develop a small residential subdivision in the outskirts of Metro Manila. The land was already acquired. The permits were in process. All they needed was capital from a handful of trusted partners to begin construction. The projected return was 30% in 2 years. 30%, I said. That's conservative, Dennis said, smiling. I didn't have much money at the time. I was still recovering from the restaurant. But Dennis's pitch was compelling, and the other people in the group seemed credible. A doctor, a dentist, and a couple of business people I vaguely recognized from the event's attendee list. I borrowed from my sister. I borrowed from my parents. I scraped together everything I could and invested it with Dennis. You can probably see where this is going. The subdivision project stalled. Then it stalled again. Then Dennis became harder to reach. Then he stopped returning calls entirely. By the time any of us hired a lawyer to look into it, we discovered the land had a defective title, the permits had never actually been filed, and Dennis had collected investments from at least 3 separate groups of people, each of whom thought they were the only investors. I lost my family's money. That was the part I still struggle to talk about. Not just the amount, but the fact that I had borrowed from the people who trusted me most, the people I had promised to protect. I paid them back. It took years, but I paid every single peso back, even when it hurt. That's the only thing from that period I'm proud of. The criminal case against Dennis dragged on for years. Last I heard, he was out of the country. And I was 32 years old, broke again, and still not asking myself the right questions. Chapter 4. The Business That Almost Worked. At 33, I started a small construction supply business. This time, I was more careful. I used my own savings, modest but real. I started small. I hired only 2 people. I rented a tiny warehouse. I learned the business from the ground up, spending months understanding supply chains, pricing, and the needs of contractors. And this time, it actually worked. Within 18 months, I was profitable. Small profits, but profits. Within 3 years, I had 8 employees and a growing list of clients. I was building something real, something I understood, something I had earned. This is the part of the story where I should have slowed down, consolidated, and built carefully for the next decade. Instead, I decided to scale. Chapter 5: The Expansion That Broke Me. Success is a dangerous teacher. It tells you that you're smart. It tells you that you have the right instincts. It tells you that whatever you did to get here will keep working if you just do more of it. I had been profitable for 3 years. I had a good reputation in my industry. I had clients who trusted me. And I was 37 years old, staring at a market that seemed wide open, telling myself I had been too cautious for too long. So I expanded. I opened a second warehouse in a different city, then a third. I hired aggressively, bringing my team from 8 people to 35 within 18 months. I upgraded our equipment. I invested in a fleet of delivery vehicles. I signed contracts with new clients that required me to carry significantly more inventory. To fund all of this, I took out loans. Not one loan, several. A business loan from a bank, a credit line from a supplier, short-term loans from lending companies when the cash flow got tight, a private loan from a business acquaintance when I needed a bridge between receivables. Each loan made sense in isolation. Each one had a story, a reason, a plan. The warehouse will generate this much revenue. The contracts will cover these payments. The receivables will come in by this date. But I was managing it all in my head. I had no real financial controller. My accountant was part-time and overwhelmed. I was so focused on growth, on signing the next contract, opening the next location, hiring the next employee, that I stopped looking at the whole picture. And when I finally did look at the whole picture, it was too late. Chapter 6: The Unraveling. It started with one client who was late on payment. A large client, one of my biggest, who owed me a significant amount for a project that had been completed months earlier. They kept promising the check was coming. It kept not coming. I had loans that needed servicing every month. I had payroll for 35 people. I had suppliers I had promised to pay. I started borrowing to cover the gaps. Short-term loans to make payroll while I waited for receivables. Lines of credit to pay suppliers while I waited for clients. One loan to pay another loan, and then another. In the financial world, they call this a debt spiral. I called it managing cash flow, which is what you call it when you don't want to face what's actually happening. By the time I was 40, my total outstanding debt, business and personal, had crossed 2 million pesos. It felt manageable if I squinted at it right. By 41, it had more than doubled. The late client eventually paid, but too late and not enough. One of my new locations failed to generate the revenue I had projected. A key employee left and took several of our client relationships with him. One of my short-term lenders demanded early repayment and threatened legal action when I couldn't comply. And then there were the 3 calls on a Tuesday, and the lawyer with the number. 4,237,000 pesos. The next chapter will be released in July.